Shenjtorët e Shqipërisë, një podcast në Shqip, ku do të njohim kush janë shenjtorët e ditëve të mëvonshme në Shqipëri e kudo në botë.
Në këtë podcast do të kemi bashkë bisedime me të ftuar, ku do t'i përgjigjemi pyetjes: çfarë do të thotë për ty të jesh një shenjtor i ditëve të mëvonshme?
Unë jam Xhoni Myrtaj
Dhe unë jam Enida Rama Alushaj. Mirë se erdhët.
Le të fillojmë. Dear friends, welcome to Shenjtorët e Shqipërisë podcast, an Albanian podcast where we will get to know the Latter-day Saints of Albania. This is episode 37. As always, I am your host, Xhoni Myrtaj, and I'm joined with my talented co-host, Enida Rama Alushaj. Hello, Enida.
Hello, Tony. Hello, friends. I'm very grateful to be on this episode with you. This is a really special episode. I'm very excited. It will be a little different than other episodes, which we'll find out in a bit.
You are right. We got special guests on this episode. Before we start, let me invite you to support us by hitting the subscribe button on our YouTube channel and also follow us on other podcast channels. This will be a great support. We are grateful for all the episodes you have watched, commented, liked, and shared on social media. Enida, without further ado, could you please introduce our new guests?
Andrew was born in Leicester, and in his youth he served a mission in the London South Mission. He graduated in law and practices family law, and over the past 20 years, he has specialized in child protection. Andrew has been a bishop, stake president, Area 70 mission president. Juliet studied music in Guildhall School of Music and Drama in London. She has taught singing, piano, and music theory for 30 years. She has served as a ward primary president, young woman president, Relief Society president, and state choir director. They have been married for 46 years and have 5 children and 19 grandchildren. Together, they have served a mission in the Adriatic South Mission 2011 to 2014. Welcome.
Thank you.
Mr. Erdős.
It's a pleasure for us to have, previously known as President and Sister Ford. We're looking forward to get to know you and your history and to share with us, obviously, what it means to you to be a Latter-day Saints. Hey, Andrew, I'm going to address to you now. Would you like to talk to us about your hometown, about the place that you grew up, and how was being born in your family, and if you have anything to share about that?
Sure. So I was actually born at home rather than at hospital. And I am the fourth of 6 children. And so they're all living. So I have an older sister, 2 older brothers, a younger brother and a younger sister. And in fact, they were in the house, 4 of them yesterday. We had an extended family gathering. But I'm a little bit proud that I was born at home. That was a wonderful thing. And I think in the 1950s, 1957, when I was born, that would be typical. You would be born at home rather than delivered in a hospital. And I was born in a very happy, loving, caring family. My parents had already joined the church in 1950, so they had been in the church for about 7 years. And so I had the blessing of being raised, in a Latter-day Saint home. And it was a very church-focused family. And we all attended a little branch of the church in Leicester. It was just called the Leicester branch. And there was just one branch. And we didn't have our own meeting house. We had a factory that was converted for use as a church. And we went there to primary, and we went there for Sunday school and sacrament meetings in the evenings. It was a lovely experience. In fact, if I turn my head this way, you see this little mark here? That is not a birthmark. That was an injury sustained on the way to primary at church when I was 4 years of age. From home, to church was a bus ride, and we'd wait for the bus. I'd wait with my two older brothers, and we'd just go without a parent. In those days, you could go without a parent in the 60s. And we were playing games, and I fell over and bang. And I ended up in hospital that night and had to be, it had to be stitched up. There was no butterflies and no glues. And I remember the doctor holding my head in a brace and actually sewing, putting in the stitches down the side there. So that's my distinguishing feature.
I'm glad I found out where that came from, and your
Yes.
title seems quite adventurous.
Yes, my primary adventure.
Juliet, I would love to know about your childhood, but I would love to know a little bit about your childhood, Juliet. What's your dearest memory from your childhood? Maybe you can tell us a bit about your parents. How do you remember them?
Okay. I just have one brother, and he is 8 years younger than me. So for the first 8 years of my life, I was an only child, and so I guess I was a spoilt child. When I look back on some of my behaviour, I didn't behave very well a lot of the time. But my parents had joined the church before I was born, so I too was raised in the gospel. This was in London. They were, I think, to describe my parents, they were very loving. I don't think they were particularly strict, but I do remember being, what's the word? I remember being punished is not the right word.
Admonished.
Yeah.
Encouraged.
No, I remember being told off. One memory that I really like from a very long time ago. It must have been when I first started school, when I was about 5. My dad used to walk me to school because the way he went to work, he would then go and get a bus and travel into London, into the city. And he used to walk me to school. And on the way to school, we used to play a game. And we would pretend that we didn't know each other. And he would walk up beside me and he would say, "Oh, good morning. How are you today?" And I would say, "Oh, I'm very well, thank you. How are you?" And we used to have this make-believe conversation. And every time he walked me to school, that's the game I wanted to play. "Daddy, let's pretend that we don't know each other." And then we play this game. And yeah, that's a good memory I have of them.
It's just so inspiring to hear about how you grew up and what you think about your parents. And it's just very inspiring and motivating to those who can hear this. I would like to address to Andrew now and just ask, how did you come up to gaining your own testimony about the Church of Jesus Christ?
Yeah, thanks, Xhoni. I don't think there was a sort of a light bulb moment. I think it was a gradual increase in knowledge and information, in feeling. I think seminary was a big part of it, to be honest, helping me to gain a testimony. I remember going to it was a weekly seminary class that we had, and we would have home study materials that we would study at home, and then all of the students would meet together on a Saturday, and then once a month we'd have a big, what we called a super Saturday, where we'd meet in the morning and we'd spend the day together and we'd have an activity in the afternoon. And I would say that it was just a gradual growing, step-by-step feeling, experience of, I think by the time I was 16 or 17, I started to ask some deep questions, or perhaps look at my friends and what they were doing and what I was doing, and did I want to do what they were doing? And probably I did, and I wondered if I was doing the right thing in the church, and could I have more fun outside of that kind of And I think it was about 16 or 17 when I began to settle down and think, I am absolutely doing the right thing. So it was that kind of age that I think my gospel understanding matured. I started to make decisions that were more gospel orientated than perhaps before. And certainly by the time I was 18, which was when I was called to serve as a young missionary, you know, I couldn't wait to go. I was really excited about that. So yeah, and then in the mission field, actually, let me just say this. In the mission field, in the first few months of serving my mission as a young missionary, with so much opposition and so much sort of rejection and you know, sort of hard, I'll call it hardship, but looking back, it really wasn't. But at the time, I was a young man. I was full of activity and aspiration, and I'd loved home, and now I was away, and you know, I was teaching the gospel, but I was being rejected a lot. And I think at that point, I did have to get on my knees. I really did have to fervently pray. I had to properly study. And within a few months, again, I think there was a sea change, a sort of a stepping stone, a point that I crossed where my confidence in preaching and teaching the gospel improved. And it just sort of settled me down, and I hopefully became a good missionary.
I definitely think you are a great missionary. I want to address to you, Juliet, now. I would love to know, what is something that your parents did that helped you to gain your testimony about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saint is true?
I think looking back now as an adult, I look back on that time when I was growing up, both as a small child and as a teenager, and their faith in the gospel never changed, never wavered. They never had any thoughts or doubts in their testimonies. We always went to all our church meetings, and it seemed that years ago there were many more activities that everybody would attend. The whole ward or branch would go to all the meetings, and so there was a great feeling of unity in and I think because the church was smaller then too, we all did a lot together, and I think that's strengthened all of us. But I think for me, looking at my parents, I never heard them say anything negative about the gospel, and in fact, they were always very involved. They always had callings. My dad was a bishop when I was very young, and so we were at church all the time. They both were a strength to me. I think even when I didn't think they were, or even when I didn't want them to be, you know, they were still there, being patient and understanding with me.
Tell them a little story about when you left for university and how your dad gave you a
when I was 18 and I went off to music school, I had decided that because my last few years of being a teenager was in a small branch and I was the only youth, there were no others, it was so small, and I had done seminary alone, and it had been the Old Testament that year, which was really hard to do on my own with a teacher. And I decided when I went off to music school that I'd had enough of church and that I wouldn't go anymore. Well, that only lasted, I mean, that's another story, but that didn't last very long. 3 days later, I was going back to church in London. So that was a non-starter. But when I left, my dad gave me a copy of the Book of Mormon, and in the front, he wrote the scripture, Helaman 5:12. And he said, if you do this, if you just do this and live by this scripture, you will not go wrong. That was his favorite scripture, and he used to quote it all the time. And so I guess I did. That's what I did.
And can you quote it?
No.
But it's about building your rock upon the foundation of Jesus.
And now my sons remember, and it was, and now my daughter remember. You know, he was reminding me that if I just built my life on Jesus Christ, that I would be okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like that, the rock or the foundation, what you build on. Yeah, thank you very much for sharing that with us. I'd like to ask Andrew now in terms of service, because obviously you've served in many capacities and in many places, right? What could you tell us about obviously service? What have you benefit or understood with it? And has the location kind of affected how you served? Meaning, like, you've served obviously in Albania, but also in England. Does that have to do anything with how you serve?
It actually hasn't. No, I've found the culture of the gospel to be the same in whichever country I've served. And yes, primarily I've served here in England. I served my mission in London, which was a wonderful experience for me because it's our capital city. And the London as a capital city is full of all nations, all kindreds, all tongues. So although I was serving in London, it was as if I was serving almost in small pockets of foreign countries because of the influx of others into London. It was a really, really good experience. I'd say when I served as an Area 70 and Julie and I were invited to visit European countries, we would go to the Nordic countries. So we went to Sweden and we went to Finland and to Norway, and we went to state conferences and I did mission tours. We went down into the Mediterranean countries and we went over to Portugal and Spain. We went into the Germanic countries and over into the East. And then eventually, with about a year to, probably a year to go, it was 2010, I think, the summer of 2010, we got an assignment to come to a district conference in Tirana, Albania, of course. And we had a wonderful weekend. It was a weekend of meetings in the Rugadurus, in the Durrus. I think that's where the main session of conference was held. But wasn't it in the...
We also met in Tirana.
We met in Tirana and had some leadership meetings there. We went out for a meal with President and Sister Neil and with... It was Spotty Kashari and Izara. I don't know.
No, I can't.
But anyway, we had a lovely meal and blah, blah, blah. But it was a lovely weekend. But I'll be honest, it was a shock coming into Albania. I had been in, like I say, into the Nordic countries, into the Germanic countries, into the sort of Mediterranean, and I'd not experienced a country like Albania, and I'd not seen the sheep on the road, and I'd not seen the shepherds, hurrying the sheep along, and sort of some of the potholes and some of the challenges. And I think over a weekend, you don't get a fair view. You can't form a view. You're in a new place, and you're sort of the food is different, and obviously the language and okay. So the short and tall of it all is when we got back on the aeroplane that was flying us back up to Gatwick on the Sunday night, I turned to Julie and said, "That was a tough experience. That was a tough weekend. That was a tough experience. I don't think we'll be coming back to Albania." Because we didn't expect a second assignment in Albania, to come back to another district conference. Well, would you believe it? Within 6 months, we were invited to meet with, it was President Uchtdorf, who was then a member of the First Presidency, and he called Julie and I to serve our mission in Albania, and I just couldn't believe it. After all the experiences that we'd had all over Europe, in all the different places, we were called to come back to wonderful Albania.
And we were glad to have you here.
Yes. And of course, in that 3 years, the surroundings, the food, the culture, the money, the language, it all pales and strips away. And when you get down to friendships, relationships, families, individuals, people.
It's about people.
It's people. And in the end, you realize, of course, that we are all Heavenly Father's children, and regardless of where we are, and the language that we speak, and the money that's in our pocket or in our wallets, we are the same.
Yeah, of course. I think everywhere, the church is worldwide, not just located to somewhere. Juliet, I would love to hear your experience, and from your experience, whether you speak the language or not, what remains the same about you no matter where you go to church on Sunday, or maybe I would also love to know if the language barrier has been an obstacle in your service during like your
I can
meeting
answer that just in one word. No, she is incredible with languages. And when we were set apart, Elder Perry, L. Tom Perry, set me apart and said nothing about language skills. When Elder Razvan set Julie apart, he blessed her with the gift of tongues. It is so unfair.
I wish I had done better. I wish I had, you know, in many ways, living in the mission home, you're surrounded by missionaries, and it's easy not to have to speak Albanian. It was easy. I didn't have to. But I'd made the decision when we arrived that I would only ever speak Albanian in church meetings. So whenever I had to give a talk, or that I would only speak in Albanian. That meant I had to prepare my talks. It would mean that the missionaries would coach me on pronunciation to make sure I spoke properly. My frustration was often that didn't leave any room to be spontaneous. If something suddenly popped into my head and I wanted to say something that wasn't written down, if I didn't have the vocabulary, I couldn't say it, and I wouldn't speak in English. I made that decision that I won't say it in English. So I did my best, and I remember a time we went to I think it was Lushnia. I think we were in Lushnia, and there was something going on with some of the sisters in Relief Society, and I couldn't understand all that I was hearing, but I could tell by the way they were talking to each other that they weren't happy, because it was getting louder and they were talking fast and shouting. And in the end, I just had to step in, and I just used the words and that I knew to hopefully calm it down. And it did. I think they were shocked, but it did. I love speaking Albanian. As I say, I wish I'd done it better. I wish I'd had somebody teach me the whole time, that I would have felt more confident. I always felt scared when I went out into the community that I'd get it wrong or I'd forget. Sundays was always hard because I'd try my hardest to understand what was going on. And most Sundays when I'd finished the meetings, I'd have a headache because I'd tried so hard to understand for 2 hours worth. And I used to have to go back into the mission home, just lay down because you lose some things during translation. And I think that's what I regret. I regret not being able to talk to Albanians and hear from them in their words rather than have it translated for me. But it's, you know, that's what it was.
Yeah.
But the feeling of church was the same, even if we couldn't understand all the words. It's the same feeling, and we ended up loving it, even though it was hard. We loved it.
Absolutely. I really like what you said about, language and service. Yes, of course, it can be a challenge, but it can be an obstacle from you enjoying service and serving others. And certainly, I've seen it myself when I've been around both of you, how much you try to integrate within the culture, within the people and the language. And I understand it's not easy. Albanian language is considered one of the most difficult ones. So I can definitely say I appreciate the effort. And that's what it is about. It's about saying that you guys were into the culture and to the language, which again we really, really appreciated. What I'd like to know now, because we're going to go into a theme of talking about your mission, because I understand this has been the most impactful during your lifetime. And certainly, you have made a difference about the people that you serve to. So tell us about how you both felt about the calling to serve in Albania and obviously to lead a mission. Because let's talk about it. Obviously, the Albanian church has been new into the country. So I assume it might have been difficult for the missionaries to preach the gospel and open new branches and wards. So Andrew, would you like to start with that?
Yeah, well, when we received the call, before you're called as a mission president and wife, there's a pre-interview with a member of the 12. And in this case, it was Elton Perry, and he spoke to us about our availability, our financial position, our children, our parents, just to check and see that we were good and ready to go and serve the Lord. And he said, look, you may never hear from us again at headquarters. You may not be called to serve as a mission president, but if you are you willing to serve? And the answer was, of course, yes. Now, that was in the summer, and it wasn't until the end of that year, in the December of 2010, that Julie had 6 months then to look and see which missions were going to be available in Europe that we could potentially serve in. And one of them was Albania Tirana mission. It became the Adriatic South mission, but at the time it was Albania Tirana mission. But the one that was open and available in the UK was the Manchester, England mission. And we convinced ourselves
that's where we were going
in that 6 months of waiting that we were going to Manchester. And so when President Uchtdorf said, Andrew, I'm calling you to serve as the mission president in the Albania Tirana mission, I looked at Julie and she looked at me and we just went, it's not Manchester. When as we trained in the MTC training center for all the new mission presidents, we felt special. Nobody could read our badges and even tell where we were going to. We had to tell them where we were going. And obviously we knew the location. We'd been for a district conference. We knew a little about the country. Frankly, when we arrived, I was petrified as a new mission president. I think when we had our first gathering of the district presidency and the branch presidents and their wives, and we brought in some food, I just didn't know what I was doing or what to say or how to conduct myself. And then we gathered the mission together and we went to visit all of the wards, the branches of the church. And we just gently but steadily got to know the country. We got to know the feeling. We got to know the branches. We got to go to the missionary homes, to the places of worship that were being used. And I guess a little unfairly, we might have said to ourselves, or at least I said to myself, what I'm finding here is a new, fledgling, young, developing church. And perhaps I compared it to my experience in England and unrealistically wanted it to be the same. which is not possible. It's just not possible. So what we did in the first few months is we set about establishing some goals and objectives, and we discussed them through with the district presidency. We discussed them with the branch presidents and wives. We discussed it in the mission council. We eventually laid out a plan that we actually signed a piece of paper, signed up to. Spotty Kashari signed it as the district president. I signed it, one or two others, and we then submitted it to the area office. And it was a vision, a plan and vision of growth for the church in Albania. And it was to, between 2011 and 2014, certainly by the end of our mission service, it was the creation of the first stake in Albania. We established that goal, that objective, and then we set about it. We knew in terms of what we needed to do, inviting those that had been baptized that were no longer participating to come back. And we knew what we needed to do in terms of reaching out and finding new families to come and join the church. We knew what we needed to do in terms of those that were holding the Aaronic priesthood to become Melchizedek priesthood holders, to get the seminary up and running, an institute really firing well.
Missionaries serving.
Missionaries out. There were 2 missionaries in the field when we arrived. There were like 38 when we got to the end of our service.
Mhm.
And so we set some goals, we set some objectives, we measured them. Every leadership meeting we held in the mission, every leadership meeting we held in the district. Every time I went to a mission president seminar outside of the country, we'd talk about the goals, the objectives, and we stuck to it. And we actually applied to the brethren for permission to create a stake about a year before the mission ended, and were told it's a little too soon. There's a little bit more growth. There's a little bit more, 1 or 2 other changes that need to be made. And so it wasn't until I think the January of 2014 we applied again, and a message came back from headquarters to say
Yes.
the brethren had considered the application. Albania was approved to have its first stake organised, and we were assigned a general authority, which was Elder Patrick Kieran, who's now a member of the 12 himself. He was then in the area presidency in Frankfurt in Germany, and he came over, I think it was in the April, am I getting that right, of 2014, and the new stake was created. So, okay, long story short, I started petrified, but we set some goals and objectives. We stuck to them. We absolutely worked at it, and every new set of missionaries that came in were introduced to the goals. Every team of missionaries that left the mission left with their well-wish, and in the end,
It happened.
it happened.
Mm.
The Lord blessed us, and a new stake was created.
I think it's amazing that you experienced the creation of the stake. That must be amazing from the perspective also from a mission president. But I'm curious to know, since you had the privilege to serve 2 missions, do you think that you took something from your first mission that you applied to, in your second with your wife?
Yeah, I'm sure that I did, but not directly. No, it was an entirely different experience coming over as the mission president. But you know what? All the building blocks, all the foundation stones were already there, because I'd had the privilege of serving as a bishop in a ward, and later serving as a stake president. So I've been able to lead a stake. And the stake that I led had 9 units, and when we arrived in Albania, there were 10 or 11 units. So it was similar. The district was a similar size to the stake. And don't forget, then I'd been able to go on and serve for 7 years as an Area 70, and I'd travelled all over Europe, seeing the church in wards and branches. And do you remember that very little branch that we went to in central Spain, where there were like 50 people that came to the district conference? So I think it was all building blocks, and just over time, and the experience was there, and I drew on it all, not just my missionary experience. I think all of my church experience went into being a mission president.
That's lovely. Juliet, I would love to hear from you, because we found out from your biography that during your service in the church you had many different callings. Can you tell us what you enjoyed the most, and what would you do again?
Yeah,
Where
good
would you
question.
be?
I don't even have to think. It's definitely music. Definitely would be, if I could choose my calling, it would be to conduct the state choir, without doubt. Probably.
So
that's-
state music
State
chairman.
music chairman is my all-time favorite calling. Conducting the choir is just the best. The most difficult calling, I think, the one that I found most difficult, was Relief Society president. That was hard. I wouldn't choose to do that again. I would do it if I was asked. I wouldn't choose it, but it would definitely be music. And I think I remember when we came to Albania, there was no music. And so I think it was you, Andrew, asked me, we were having a district conference, and Andrew said, do you think we can have a choir? Do you think we can have a choir for district conference? And so I remember going to rehearsals in Tirana, and Motra Kashari, she was there. And
she was amazing.
She would always conduct the music. But anyway, we managed somehow. I used to say to people back in England, I can't believe that I'm conducting a choir in Albania with Albanians. I mean, but it was just a surreal experience, but I loved it. I really enjoyed it. It was good.
Yeah, I'd like to elaborate a little bit more on that, because we know that serving a mission as a mission president and his wife is truly important, truly impactful. They tend to say that we gotta have a mission president, but we need to have a mission president's wife, because they act as parents, right, for all the full-time missionaries. And we know how much missionaries do tend to long for that parental love, being outside in the mission field. So I want to ask you, Juliet, first, and then I'll ask Andrew the same question. But how did you see your role as being a parent in the mission field? How impactful was it for you two?
They told us in the MTC that we would love the missionaries like our own children, and I thought, that's just not possible. That won't happen. Well, I can't tell you how long it took. Yeah, look at those guys. It didn't take very long. It may even have been when we met, when I first saw them, that I had this sudden, they're mine. And I used to say to them, the elders and the sisters, I used to say to them, you are mine while you are here. And I loved them. I loved them all in different ways. We got to know some better than others. Some left quickly after we got there. Others served with us the whole time. And then right at the end, the last group that came in were only there with us for probably, I don't know,
8 days or something.
Just a few days. And I couldn't bear to leave any of them. I remember when the new mission president arrived, President, who followed us?
Swiss. No, it's Swiss.
No, before President Anderson.
Yeah, the wind. Wait, I
Yes,
remember that.
yes, you're quite right.
I can't remember. I'm sorry, I've forgotten his name. And I was thinking about. I was talking to his wife, and all these missionary faces were in my mind, and I thought, how can I leave him? He needs this. How can I leave her? She won't understand this missionary, this sister, like I do. And so, yeah, I did. The missionaries were, for me, my focus during the whole time. I loved it when we traveled the mission and visited with them in all the areas that we went to. And sometimes we had to go through terrible weather, especially when we went up to Pristina, and getting stuck in snow. But the missionaries were just at the forefront of my mind all the time.
Yeah. I think Julie had more motherly instinct. I was I'd hold myself back just a tad, I'm the mission president. I'm going to be, but I think I had a really good relationship with the missionaries. I think it was, I got the privilege of interviewing every single one of them every 6 weeks, on a one-on-one basis. Oh yeah, look at that.
And while he interviewed one in his office, I was outside talking to the other one, getting to know everything else that happened.
They were probably circumspect with me, and then they'd be much more open with Julie, and then she'd come and tell me what they'd told her outside, and that was more informative than what they were talking to me about but the relationship was always good. There were happy times, there were sad times, there were accidents, there were illnesses, there were injuries, there were deaths at home that, parents passed away, and I had to, comfort and help missionaries grieve. It was like having 80 children.
But, looking at this picture that you've just put up reminds me of the couples that we had. The couples were my admiration for them is never ending, because we were, as I said before, we were living in a mission home surrounded by missionaries. We had all the support we needed. They would arrive, and within 24 hours, pretty much, off they went to their apartment in Elbasan or Vlora or Shkodra or wherever it was, and
or up to Jakarta,
left pretty much to get on with it. And so, without them, the mission wouldn't have been the same. They were all just so important.
But here's an interesting thought. We went to a mission president seminar, and Elder Bednar of the 12 came to the seminar, spoke to all the mission presidents. We would go to these seminars at least 6 monthly, something like that.
Yeah.
And Elder Bednar made a very strong point about our role and the model, if you like, the example, the missionaries would look at us and look at our relationship. They'd examine how we behaved and how we respected one another and how we talked and loved and cared for one another. And that would be helpful to them in planning their own marriages and their own futures, their own educations, their own lives. And he said to us, the success of a mission is not judged in the mission field in the moment. He said the success of the mission is judged in 20 or perhaps even 30 years' time. Did the missionaries have a good experience? Have they returned home? Have they embraced the gospel? Have they found a companion? Are they able to choose to get married in the temple? Are they raising an LDS family? Are they living the gospel in their lives? He said that is one of the best measures of the success of missionary life. And I agree with him. We get so much joy when we receive through the post
wedding invitations,
or Julie gets all the WhatsApp.
I get all the birth announcements.
We get we see the babies, and
it's amazing. It's just amazing.
We are having joy and rejoicing in our missionary
posterity. Absolutely.
Yeah, I can definitely attest to that. Having served a mission myself, I understand the importance of having a relationship, because they become like your second parents, right? Important figures of the best 2 years of your life. And I guess that's why those are important. So we talked about the impact that both of you had into the church in Albania, and obviously with the missionaries and the organizing of the first stake in Albania. I wanted to just briefly ask Julia, because I know you had an important part to play into translating the hymn book, the first hymn book in the Albanian language. Now, I don't know how you did it, but could you please tell us?
I'll try and tell you briefly. we were in second branch, and one of the new hymns, even before it had been published, I'm not sure whether it's Myrtaj Kashari that did it, but we had copies, we had photocopies of
Of a
one
draft,
of the
a draft of
yeah,
one of the hymns.
I think it was probably Numero Bikimit, because we used to sing that so much, but I can't remember. But anyway, whatever hymn it was, as I look through it, see, I think because I'm musical and have an ear, even though I couldn't speak Albanian fluently, I understood how to pronounce it. I understood where the strong rhythm was in the language. And when we were singing the song, I could see that some of the words didn't fit the music. And so who did I speak to? No, I can't remember her name. And I just said, this is not, she said, what do you mean? So I gave her an example, and she said, oh yeah, that doesn't sound right. So then she gave me all the hymns that they'd currently done, which there were probably half of them by then. She gave them all to me, and she said, I want you to go through them all and then come to our translation meeting and tell us which parts don't sound right. So I had to go through all the hymns line by line, word by word, and then write down hymn number 24, first verse, second line. And then a lot of the hymns they didn't know. So I had to sing the line, and they would hear the word and the music, and they would see, oh, that word doesn't fit there. And so they changed it when they could. It wasn't always possible, because when you change one thing, it changes everything. And sometimes it was just too difficult to make the change. But I just did my best and really enjoyed. Yetta Beku? Yetta? Am I getting that right? I think it was her.
Yeah, that's her name.
I think it was her. Yeah. So yeah, we used to have a lot of fun in those translation meetings.
When the hymn book was finally published and printed, I think it was President Mehmet had our names printed onto the fronts of two copies, and he sent them over to us as a little gift. And we cherished those hymn books, the first edition of the...
In fact, you know what? When we first came back from our mission, I would say for probably the first year,
we would take our hymn books.
We took our Albanian hymn books to church, and we only sang in Albanian. And I think it probably bothered some people, but it was the only way I could keep Albania in here, by singing the hymns, and it was lovely. And eventually we thought, well, we better stop now, but we did that for a long time.
Yeah, it was an amazing story. I'm impressed how you did that, since you weren't like fluent in Albanian, but I think the music, like the gospel, it's a universal language, so it works. Andrew, I would love to hear from you. What was one of the first things that you did after finishing your mission, and maybe talk us a bit how your life changed because of your mission, your second mission, because we want to know more about the Albanian one.
Well, before we returned, and probably in the last 3 or 4 months or so, I began to have recurring nightmares about what are we going to do when we get home, because to the point of leaving into the mission field, I'm a qualified solicitor. I worked in family law, and what I did is I stepped out of the profession for 3 years, and I then began to get a little anxious about how am I going to return to my profession. It took up a lot of sleeping time for me, and I remember thinking, will I be able to provide an income for my home and family, and will I be able to just slot back in? Will I be able to get my practicing certificate back, and blah blah, all those little worries and anxieties. Well, long story short, initially it was a challenge. It required effort. I had to reapply for my license to practice as a lawyer in England and Wales. I then had to build up a client base again, and I had to re-establish a practice. And now we're 10 years home, and you'll be a little bit jealous perhaps, but my 10 years of practice post return from the mission field have been the most rewarding and fulfilling in every sense of the word. The blessing, it's like a hose pipe of blessings has opened and has just been pouring out on us for the last 10 years. So all that anxiety of laying in bed and wondering, will I be able to take up my profession again? Will I be able to get back to work? Will I be able to provide and achieve the goals that I have in life? And the answer is a resounding yes.
Thank you. I would love to hear from you, Juliet. How was it for you after finishing your mission? Because listening to you, how much you loved your mission, and especially the missionaries, how was to be released from your
You have to be honest.
duties?
How honest do you want me to be?
How much as you want?
It was terrible. It was terrible. We didn't want to leave. When it came to the end, we didn't want to leave. In fact, we asked if we could extend. We wanted to do 2 more years. We said, can we do 5 years? And they said, no, you can't. So I didn't want to leave my home. Living in the mission home for 3 years, I loved it. I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to leave my missionaries because they were everything to me. I didn't want to leave them. I just didn't want to come home. It took me a long time when we got home to settle down. My father died in April 2014, just before we got back. And so when we came back, as well as being miserable about having to leave, I had to look after my mother because she wasn't well. And she came to live with us for a while, and that was difficult, dealing with not wanting to be here anyway, wanting to be back in Albania, and then having to look after her and her needs and everything that she needed. So it took me a very long time to just, in fact, I can't tell you when it eventually went away. I think eventually I put it all in a box and shut the lid and left it in the box and got on with life. And occasionally I will open the box and it's still there. Even after all these years, I miss it so much. And yet when we look at our missionaries now, many of them have been married for years. Many of them, Greasy Maripesa, they have 5 children. Things have moved on so much. So I think, yeah, it was hard. It was hard, but we hung on, and we're still here.
I had a story, a metaphor, analogy, if you like. I went and did a mission tour just before we came into the mission field. It was in Hamburg, Germany. I went there and met the missionaries and spoke to the mission president, serving as an Area 70. And the mission president was just coming to the end of his missionary service. In fact, the Hamburg, Germany mission was closing at the end of his mission, and they'd reorganized the missions. And this would be the last time that mission, in fact, I think it's been reorganized since then. But anyway, so there I was in Hamburg, and I said to the mission president, how do you feel? Your mission is coming to an end. He said, oh, I've got to tell you this story about, because I was on the call and I told him that I was preparing to go to Albania and to serve. He said, it's going to be like this. He said, think of yourself at the beginning of your mission, standing on a platform, a train station, and an express train is approaching the platform, but it doesn't slow down to pick up the passenger. It's just going to fly through the station, and they'll grab you and you'll go flying off up the track with the train. He said, the train is the mission, you're the president, you'll be grabbed and you'll just go flying off up the track. He said, and now when you get to the end of the mission, you'll come to another station, and this time the train won't slow down, they'll push you off. And the train will go flying up and it'll just disappear, and you'll be left on the platform as it flies away. And it was so heartbreaking for us to at the end of the mission to just see the end, and the train just flew off, and off it went. Yes, it was very sad, but it was, I think, something that most mission presidents and wives
Go through.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm curious to know what helped you to kind of to settle down and to not miss a lot your mission. What did you do to comfort yourself somehow?
Take our hymn books to church and sing in Albanian.
Yeah, take my hymn book. Just, I guess, you know what? Maybe that scripture that my dad gave me all those years before. I just had to have faith. I just had to keep holding on. I talk a lot about this, you know, the rod of iron and holding on to the gospel, because I think life is hard. And we just have to hold on. Whatever else is going on around us, we just have to hold on. And I think amidst all the uncertainty and the sadness that I was feeling at this change, I just kept holding on, and was given callings and fulfilled the callings, and just kept going until it began to feel better.
People would stop us in the corridor at church where we worship here in England, especially in the first time we'd see them, and they'd say, "How was it?" And we're trying to describe 3 years in response to how was it? And we'd want to do like a 2-hour fireside on how it was, but they wanted a response in
it was great
10 seconds. So we'd say, "It was great, we loved it," and they'd say, "Oh, that's good," and then they'd walk off.
And you're like, "Wait, I need to talk more about it."
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I think if anything, we will always be ambassadors for Albania, because there's still a lot of misconceptions about Albania.
Yeah.
And most of it is not true. Some may be, but now we know. And we say to people, go. If they ask us, we say, go and see.
Yeah.
You'll love it. It's beautiful. The people are wonderful. Go. People are still a bit afraid. I was never afraid in Albania, never, wherever I was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely love that saying, come and see. And that definitely applies for Albania, because
it does. It does.
No matter what you hear about it, you never know until you experience it firsthand. And from what you guys shared, it's an absolutely inspiring to see how your mission not just changed your perspective about Albania as a country, but also it changed your perspective about service and about living the gospel. Obviously, we know that besides service, you guys have professions, so you work. I wanted just to ask Andrew specifically regarding your profession, because as we know, being a lawyer, it's a very demanding and sometimes challenging profession. How have you managed to obviously do your profession and still be a Latter-day Saint? Has that been a challenge for you, and how have you managed to overcome that yourself?
Yeah, no, it hasn't been a challenge at all. Living the gospel has been, it has complemented and assisted me in my profession. I've tried not to represent members of the church as an attorney, because I do family law, and family law includes marriage breakdown and child arrangements and sorting out the finances, that, you know, the home and the pensions and And so if I act say for the wife, then the husband hates me. And if I act for the husband, the wife not hates me. But you know what I'm trying to say.
Conflict.
And so what I've said to myself over the years is decline to act for members of the church in these very sensitive, very personal legal matters. And so I've been able to serve as a church leader and as a friend and not have to confuse my legal role with my friendships and my church service. But my profession, my training, my qualifications have been a wonderful blessing in my service, and it's never held me back or hindered or caused any challenges. Absolutely none whatsoever. In fact, an interesting story, when I was a young missionary serving in London, and I was 18 and 20, 18, 19, 20 is when I served. And so towards the end of my mission, in the last 6 months or so, my mother was sorting out university applications for me. And she put it in England, you apply to a number of universities, and if they're interested in you as a candidate, they'll either make you an offer to the university or they'll ask for an interview. And one of the London universities, University College London, where I eventually read law, UCL invited me for an interview, and I asked the mission president, can I go to the interview? And he said, of course, but take your companion with you. You must go together. And I went to the college. I had the interview. It was a 1-hour interview. My companion sat outside the door and I went inside and I had this interview. And we spent the whole 60 minutes discussing the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And probably 5 minutes talking about law and what law meant and what I hope to achieve in a legal profession in law. It was the vice dean of the college was so interested in the gospel and wanting to see what I had to say about the church. And I got the offer and I took the place. And I know that they took me because of my, well, I don't know. I believe that it was because of my faith and because of my perhaps courage to talk about the gospel and being a Christian, that was recognized and got me into that college. Don't know if I answered your question.
Definitely appreciate your honesty. The reason why we do tend to ask this question is because we are requested, obviously, sometimes to be a good Latter-day Saints, to be a good citizen. But obviously, we do not profess to be perfect. And even in our professions, sometimes we do make mistakes. And the reason why I guess I asked the question is because we tend to know how we're gonna, still try to be a good example in everyday settings. Because as we are told in the gospel that we are tested more when we are out in the world, when we are with people not of our faiths, and that's why it really, inspiring to me to hear that you maintain that sort of faith and example into the gospel, although it's been difficult. Obviously, it gets difficult every day. But thank you so much for sharing that. I think that was very, very good answer. Thank you.
And now, guys, I would love to hear your story because I want to know, how did you guys meet? Juliet, maybe you can tell us, how did you meet and what did you first see when you met Andrew?
We met at a church dance when we were both, how old would I have been? 19. And you'd have been 20 when he got back from his mission. We hadn't known each other before. We were both students in London. We met at a church dance. It wasn't a very good meeting the first time because I was going to be singing during that evening. I was going to be performing some song, or I can't remember now. And I always get very nervous before I sing or perform. so I was nervous, and I can't remember how we came across each other, but he told me that I was making a fuss over nothing, and that what was I so worried about, and I thought it was rude, and I said, you don't know me, what you know, why are you talking to me like that? So our first meeting wasn't particularly a good one.
Not changed all that much.
A good one. But we would see each other at church, at institute, and activities, and I remember it was probably a few months in. We went on a double date. I went with somebody else, and Andrew took a girl. And during the evening, it became apparent that I didn't want to be with the other boy, and Andrew didn't want to be with the other girl. So after that evening ended, we decided that we'd go out together and get to know each other, and that's what we did.
It's about a year after getting back that we got married. But when I asked Julie's father permission to marry, in the very traditional way, we had a dinner together. It was probably 2 or 3 hours of idle chatter, and everybody knew why we were having dinner. It was to ask for permission to marry Julie, and Julie kept looking at me and ask now, now. And when I did ask, he said no. He said no. And I said, well, why not? He said, because you've got no prospects. And I thought, oh my God.
You have to understand, I was the only daughter. I was at music school. I was training to be a singer, and performer. And my dad saw marriage as a barrier, as a stop to all this happening. And he wanted me to be this famous singer. So he said no, but we got married anyway.
And I said to him, on that very same day, I said, well, I've fasted and prayed about it, and I'm going to marry your daughter anyway.
He was fine. He was fine in the end.
He was fantastic. When Julie and I finally got together, there was no going back. I think we were committed right from the start. It wasn't like a hesitation. I think we were engaged for like 9 months or 6 months.
6 months.
6 months, and then we got married in the summer. We were both students at the time. I'd just finished my first year, and you'd finished your second year. And it was a year later, actually, that we had our first child. So I'd finished my second year when our first child was born, and you were graduating as
that was really hard.
As our first child was born.
That was really hard.
The dean that had interviewed me at the college at the end of year 2, when he realised not only was I now married, but I had a child. When the results came out at the end of the year, and we got a slip of paper to say what your grades were in the subjects that you'd taken exams in. It was all exam based. But anyway, at the end of the year, you got this slip of paper, and he'd written on it in his own hand, congratulations on your results, and congratulations on your marriage, and congratulations on the birth of your first child.
Yeah. So I understand from this that you were very committed to your studies also.
Yes, I continued to study as long as I could after we had our son Russell, but 2 years later we had our daughter Shelley, and at that point we made the decision that we weren't going to have other people look after our children so that I could further my career. So whilst I continued studying during that time, once she was born, I stopped, because I didn't want other people looking after my children. And I know that doesn't work for everybody. There are some people and they have very good careers, and people look after their children, and that's the way they do it. That wasn't the way we wanted to do it. So I went a different route, and I started teaching, and that's what I did. I taught from home for years and years and years.
But there is a great story here, real quick. we went to a concert after about, what, 10 years of marriage, or a little bit
It was
more perhaps?
1990, 12 years of marriage.
12 years of
12
marriage. We
years.
went to a concert in Leicester. It was Handel's Messiah, and it was just before Christmas. And when we opened the program to see who the soloists were, the lead soprano was one of Julie's classmates from the Guildhall, from her music school. And Julie said to me, she said, I know that girl. We were in the same class together. And now she's on the stage.
On the stage, and I'm not.
And I'm not. And I thought, I'm in trouble. You know, I'm in big trouble. You know, I mean, I'm the reason, or at least that's what I thought.
I went during the interval, I went to speak to her because we hadn't seen each other for many years.
You sent a message and she said, come and see me at the interval.
So I went to speak to her and we caught up on what we were doing. And I told her kind of, I guess I felt a bit ashamed, really, to say, I haven't really done much with my singing. I've been teaching, but I haven't been like you. I'm not on the stage. I'm not a performer. I have 5 children. And the response that she gave me was completely different. She said, I am so jealous of you, because she still wasn't married. I remember from college, she never had a good relationship with her family. She said, I travel all the time. I stay in different hotels. She said, I wish I had a life like yours. So you see, you never know.
So when she came back to sit with me in the second half, instead of being told off that she didn't get on the stage, she was lovely with me because she said, I'm in the best place here.
Yeah, definitely. Of course, being married and having children, it's a sacrifice sometimes, but I think it's the most important thing that we are called to do in life. I mean, I knew that, but having a small baby, I definitely agree now regarding this. But you guys recently celebrated 46 years, if I'm not wrong, of marriage. I want to know what's the secret to a long and happy marriage. How did you make it so far?
I'm so patient. I'm so patient and understanding. I guess it's not all been. Yeah.
It's a lovely photograph.
That is
Beautiful.
a lovely photograph.
Now that was taken not long after I'd had an operation. I had my left knee replaced, and we could barely walk up and down that very gentle path. And it was lovely to go away and just spend a little time together. You know, it's gone so quickly, hasn't it? I
can't believe it. I can't believe it's 46 years.
It was just the other day that I proposed and we started our journey, and, you know, we went to the temple and were sealed, and it's just happened. It's magic. It's just, it's magical and it's magic.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say, it does definitely helps the gospel of Jesus Christ to unite couples, doesn't it? And to strengthen that marriage unit. It is so important. Obviously, you guys have 5 wonderful children that you brought into this life. And my question is simple, but I would like to hear your version of this. Is how has it been, obviously, as a family, to stay strongly into the gospel of Jesus Christ? Because we hear this a lot, that sometimes, unfortunately, family members do decide a different path. So has that been difficult for you to deal with that, and how have you overcome those differences in your family?
Yeah, we have 5 wonderful children and 19 wonderful grandchildren. Boy, there they are.
Oh, yeah.
And our relationship with each and every one of them is different, but they're all treated the same.
Yeah.
And the love and respect we have for them, and I think the love and respect they have for us is the same.
Yeah.
And we have one son who chooses not to come to church, but lives a wonderful, moral, good life.
But we don't treat him any differently. We don't love him any less. he comes to our house all the time. He's as welcome as all of them. It makes no difference. In fact,
he's in legal practice with.
Yeah, he is. Both the boys are lawyers as well. We once spoke to one of it was M. Russell Ballard. We once spoke to him and said, what do we do about our son who doesn't want to come to church? What can we do? Because we thought, Elder Ballard he'll give us the answer, and then we'll know what to do. And he said, actually, very interestingly, he said, back off and love him. And so we did. We backed off and we just love him. And we have a great relationship. And if I dare say it, the gospel almost becomes secondary, because the most important thing is the relationship that we have with him. And perhaps that is because of the gospel, but the fact that he doesn't come to church has not altered our relationship at all.
Yeah, I love that. It resembles the messages that we learn from the gospel. The one that keeps coming to my mind is the story of the prodigal son, that obviously the father never gave up on his son, despite of him taking a different path. He was still his father. And when he obviously came back, he was there willing to accept him into the family, because like you said, family relationships should be first and should not divide us just because somebody does not believe the way we do. So thank you for that question, that answer to that question. We wanted to also ask you now regarding obviously your talents and hobbies. So first of all, I want to ask Andrew, because I know you are a huge fan of football, and I know you support a local team as well. What would you like to tell us about this hobby of yours? Where did it come from, and what do you do with it?
You know what? I can remember in the early 70s, I was probably 12 or 13. And every Saturday afternoon that the football team would play, Leicester City is the name of the team. Leicester, the town that I was born in, the city. So Leicester City are the football team. And so from the 70s, all the way through my youth, when I was in London and Leicester would come and play in London, I'd go to the London grounds and watch them there. My brother and sister are the same, aren't they? They've got season tickets, and we've just loved this team over and over and over. Anyway, that photograph is taken at the Leicester City Football Club ground. And in that season, the 2015-2016 season, my team came top of our Premier Division. They came top of our league, which is the best league in the world. My team... best league in the world. And I was at the ground giving a presentation. I was there giving a seminar, and the club asked me if I wanted to get a hold of the trophy and pose with it, with the ribbons and so forth. And so that was a very proud moment for me. I was there giving a presentation, a legal presentation, and the club, I think that was a replica. Yeah. I don't think it was the actual. No. But it was heavy, and can you see the small letters and writing? Each of the clubs that win the trophy get their names etched in at the bottom there. And Leicester City is a minnow, a small club amongst very big clubs. You've heard the names of Arsenal and Liverpool and Manchester United and Manchester City and Tottenham Hotspur, and Leicester City, we're the minnows, and we rose up and rose up and rose up to the top. Yeah, fantastic. Loved it. We still avidly support them, but we don't get to go very often. But we now travel a little more. We travel a little more around the country, going to games in other stadiums so that we can watch them play.
Juliet, I would love to hear about you and your hobbies. We learned that music was a big part and is a big part of your life, but I'm sure you also have many talents and hobbies. What do you want to do? What do you enjoy doing in your free time? And maybe is there any talent that you have that you think you might have passed on to your children?
Well, I think music would have to be. They're all musical to a degree, some more than others. They all sing. Yeah, music definitely features in all of their lives, and that has passed through to a lot of the grandchildren, because a lot of the grandchildren are having music lessons, either instrumental or dancing. That wouldn't have come from me. I'm not a dancer, but I guess it's still music. So
It's performing.
it's performing. Yeah, I think being a performer, I'm used to being in front of people. So even though I felt nervous inside, I've always had the ability to stand there and look very composed and as though I'm in charge of the situation, even if inside I don't feel like I am. And I think that also, I think all the children have that quality. They're very self-assured. They're very able and capable. I'm not sure. Well, I don't know. Definitely though.
And in this last few years, you've started cross stitching, haven't you?
I've started. My mum used to like doing cross stitch. I don't know if you know what cross stitch is, but my dad was an artist, and he used to teach art. He used to teach lettering, different letter form. But he would draw and he would paint, and I think it used to frustrate him always that I couldn't draw, that I couldn't see what he could see. But I think this is my art. This is my way of creating. I can't use a pencil or a paintbrush to paint, but I can use stitching, and I can do it that way. So I love to do cross stitching, and I've done quite a lot, and I give them away. I'm doing one at the moment that is so difficult that we're going to keep this one because this will hang in our house. I love doing that. I love reading. I do read a lot. I like traveling. We travel. We have a daughter in America. I go and see her. I've got a daughter in Ireland. I go and see her. I don't seem to have.
Do you enjoy exercising?
Oh yeah, I go to the gym too. I go to the gym Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I have the weekend off, and I do enjoy that too. So yeah, I don't think I ever sit down and say, "Oh, I'm bored. What shall I do now?" So yeah, I'm good.
I love how active you guys are, like going. It's kind of, I always say that Albanians, elderly people, let's say, or like not even elderly. I think most of Albanians are wired like after the 40s. They're like, oh, I'm old, or like they have another way of viewing things. So this is inspiring. I think it's gonna inspire people, Albanians.
Well,
I
we're
love that.
mid-60s.
Yeah, we are. I can't believe that.
I'm also a motorcyclist. My father was a motor mechanic, and he taught me how to build motorcycle engines. And I've kept my love of motorcycling up. Yeah, there you go. And I'm still riding motorcycles and loving it. My bikes change
Often.
frequently.
I'll tell you a quick story about motorbike. I don't go on the back anymore, really. I kind of feel more comfortable in the car now. But when we first got married, we didn't have a car. We only had a motorbike. And
In
London, when we were living in London. So when we went out together, we would both get on the motorbike. And bearing in mind, in the first year, I was pregnant with our first baby. I would ride that motorbike until I got to 8 months pregnant. And at 8 months, I stopped riding it because we couldn't fit on.
people on.
The three of us couldn't fit on
You
anymore.
couldn't fit the tummy. I was sitting on the tank, and Julie still couldn't get on the back.
I stopped riding it, but we rode motorbikes together for years, but I haven't done recently.
I've enjoyed motorcycling, although I don't recommend it to anybody because I know that it's a dangerous hobby. I'm not recommending it. I'm saying for me it's worked, but for others,
May not.
think about it.
Mm.
It's a hobby that can have such sad consequences, I'm afraid.
It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is so inspiring, to be honest. Like Enida was saying, you don't see a 60-year-old in Albania riding a motorcycle or going to the gym. It's just, wow, it's unbelievable. You guys are absolutely the greatest. So thank you for that.
Okay.
So obviously, Andrew, I want to ask you now, because we know, and I know personally, your service has undoubtedly had an impact to the people of Albania, but also many others that you served with. My question is this: what is your advice to help us serve like our Savior Jesus Christ? What can we do so we can serve like him?
Yeah, understood. Okay. Well, it would probably be trust in him and don't put limitations on yourself, and don't allow the apparent challenges or limitations that come along hold you back. And I'm thinking now, I'm talking to myself, because we're at a stage now where we're thinking, how can we serve, and what can we do, and what can we do more to help in the growth of the gospel? But it would be, have confidence and know that after all that you can do, the Lord will lift you and guide you and carry you to places that you never thought were achievable in your life. And certainly when Julie and I were preparing to serve in the mission field together, and in that 6 months, we had a 6-month period where we were able to prepare. We had thought that it would be plain sailing and that all would be well, and that my professional life, I could get it all organized properly, and home life and health would be great, and sort of every convenience would be made available to us. In fact, we found that there were barriers put up to our service, or at least we felt there were barriers that were being put up. And so what I'm saying is, those artificial barriers that looked insurmountable sometimes to us, in terms of health, in terms of challenges at work, in terms of getting things right, ready to go into the mission field, we just had to push through in faith. And in the end, you just have to say, I've done as much as I can. Now I need help. I need help to go just that little bit further and to get done what needs to be done in the preparation or in the service that I've been called to do. So I actually do. Yeah. Okay. So you get the idea that don't let artificial limitations hold you back. If the Lord calls, he will find a way for you to fulfill the service. When I was first called as an Area 70, my first overseas assignment was to go to,
Was it the Netherlands? Was it the temple?
No, it was France. I think it was
the Lyon.
I think it was Lyon, France.
State conference.
Yes, it was the Lyon State Conference in France. And I don't speak French, but I learned a little French in school in England. That's one of the languages that's taught. But anyway, it was the Saturday. They'd hired a hall, and for our leadership meetings over here in England, when we have a Saturday conference, you might expect 50 or 60 people to come along to a leadership training meeting. This hall kept filling up, and it kept filling up and filling up. And in the end, there must have been 200 or 300 people there waiting for this new Area 70 to
speak,
give a presentation to them through an interpreter. And I sat there, looking out over the audience, and I started to have a mini panic attack. Not that I was twitching or my eyes, but I was sitting there saying to myself, you can't do this. This is too much to ask. And I actually said in a little prayer, I can't do this. And then the feeling came as I said, I need help. I can't do this. And as I said that, I had an overwhelming feeling come over me. There wasn't a voice, just a feeling. And the feeling was, no, you can't do it, but I can. And when I felt that, I was able to get up and speak and be heard, and I was able to share the Spirit, knowing that it wasn't me that was doing this. I was the instrument, but it was the Lord through me presenting a message to these wonderful brothers and sisters that were gathering together, hoping for an inspirational stake conference weekend. And I learnt my lesson. You can't, but I can.
That is amazing. Thank you very much for sharing that, Andrew. I can definitely relate on what you said, because seeing you serve, what I found personally is that you're very approachable, and people feel that you definitely bring the best out of them with your infectious smile and positivity. And sometimes that humility that you just talked about, to be able to ask for help. I think of the prophet Joseph Smith. We think about many achievements that he carried out into the restoration of the gospel, but he was willing to accept help from other people that supported him into doing the work. So thank you for sharing that. Those are very valuable tips on how we can serve like the Savior. So Juliet, I wanted to know, because I understand the gospel it's very important to you. Obviously, you've lived the gospel all your life, and obviously it has blessed you tremendously. What would you say, especially to the Albanian saints hearing this, what would you say about the importance of the gospel and why we should cling into it?
I don't have any comparison to measure that by. This is all I've known my whole life, and this is a good way to live. I've heard people say before, even if it's not true, it's a good way to live, and it is, because the gospel teaches good things. The gospel is love. It's relationships between people. It's our relationship with God. It's how we are going to live our lives. There is nothing negative in this way of living, and living the gospel can only make everything else better. I think that's our experience, that when we do what the brethren asked us to do, when we're focused on the objectives that we have, when we fulfill our callings, when we're kind to each other, all these things, they make us good people, and it's a good way to live.
I loved hearing your testimonies. Now we are at the end, and I would love to ask to both of you our last question. What does it mean to be a Latter-day Saint? Maybe Andrew, you can go first.
Oh, and then Julie, she's worked up an Albanian testimony for you, and I will just say at the end of her testimony, I'll close it with thanks. But yeah, I have a testimony of the gospel. It means everything to me. It's like I said in the introduction question that I was asked, there wasn't a light bulb moment where suddenly the light came on and then everything was fine. It's been something that has been with me throughout my life. My ability to live the gospel has been good or not so good at different periods in my life, but never has there been a doubt that God is there, that Jesus is the Christ, that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is the true and living church here upon the earth. I have a firm testimony of the word of God that we read in the Bible and in the Book of Mormon and in the other scriptures that we have. I have every confidence in the brethren who lead, guide, and direct us, the members of the First Presidency and the Council of the 12, and the other authorities. I know that they're called of God. I know that they are good men and great women. I'm certain of it. I've been close enough to them and companioned with most of them, including President Nelson. We had an assignment together for a weekend, including many of the apostles, in particular Elder Kieran, who he and I are good friends, and we've worked together and served together. If there was something not right, I would be honest and tell you. But I can tell you, knowing them as I do, that I have every confidence in them. I feel the Spirit, and I feel the guidance of the Spirit in my life. And I have no hesitation in bearing my testimony of the truthfulness of the gospel of Jesus Christ. In his name, amen.
I think there are enough things that have happened in our lives and in my life that I can look back on now and have no doubt of the blessings that have come to us in many and varied ways when we've needed them. There are many times when we have felt we've reached the end of what we're able to cope with, but there's always a little bit more. There's always, we've never been let down. We've never been
left alone.
No, we've never been left alone. We always, my mum, towards the end of her life, when she lived in a care home right at the end of her life, and she'd get very lonely because she couldn't come to church. She wasn't mobile and she couldn't get out to come to church. And she would say to me often, all you need to have with you is the Spirit, because that's all she had. She said, that's all I have. I have the Spirit to comfort me, and it does. And she said, that's all you need. So I kind of figured that with the scripture that my dad gave me, Helaman 5:12, and with my mum telling me that all I need is to make sure I have the Spirit with me, that I'm kind of pretty set, really. That if I'm faithful, and that if I follow the guidance of the scriptures and of the brethren, that really I can't go wrong. And as I say, there have been enough blessings in our lives for me to be certain that somebody's watching over us. Somebody knows exactly what's going on and has a hand in all of it. So I have no doubt. I'd recommend it to anybody.
You're going to bear your testimony now in Albania.
I'm sorry I had to write it down because I didn't know if I'd remember it. I hope I pronounce it properly. Jam shumë mirënjohëse për Injilin e Jezu Krishtit në jetën time, për mua e për familja tona. Unë e di që Injili i Jezu Krishtit është e vërtet, dhe Russell Nelson është profeti ynë sot. Jam mirënjohëse për sakrifica e Jezu Krishtit, edhe unë e di që libri e Mormonit është e vërtet. Jam shumë i lumtur që kam adhur Shqipërinë. E dua Shqipërinë dhe i dua njerëzit. Faleminderit për jeni kaq i sjellshëm me ne. Dhe unë them këto gjëra
Në emër të Jezu Krishtit. Amen.
I'm very inspired from your testimony from your Albania. I'm impressed that you still remember that. But it's been a pleasure to have you guys here, and I think that you brought a lot, not only to the podcast, but also to all the Albanians while you served here. I'm very inspired to see how you continue to live the gospel even now after your mission, and it's very impressive also that you guys are very joyful, and like you seem like you're in your 40s or like 35. And I really love how you live your life.
I just need you to know that we both feel the same. Albania changed our lives forever. We've never been the same since. We talk about it as if we've only just come home, but we've been back 10 years. It's so important to us.
There is a mansion prepared for us in heaven, and it will be Albania.
It will be Albania.
Yeah, I can definitely say in return to that also you have changed a lot of lives for the Albanians, and I feel like I'm a privileged one as well to say this. I've said it before, and I just want to reiterate that how much impact you've had, not just to the missionaries, but to the members, to investigators, to all those people you made in contact. And it just comes to my mind that phrase that says, many are called, but few are chosen. And I'm certain that Heavenly Father chose both of you to be called on this special mission to this small country. And I think we needed you. And I'm grateful for your example and for your the way that you live your life, because it has really made an impact. And now we're talking a decade after your full-time mission is over, and we still talk about you. We still remember you in our hearts. So thank you very much for the bottom of my heart. Okay.
Thank you
very much. Finally, to thank our guests Andrew and Juliet Ford, or how we know them as President and Sister Ford. And thank you, dear friends, for listening to this episode 47 of SH.E.SH podcast. A special thanks goes to SH.E.SH podcast team who has worked for this episode. We invite you to watch and listen to our podcasts on our YouTube channel, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. If you'd like to participate, please send a message on our social media or on our email, sheshpodcast24@gmail.com. We thank you for your time, and we'll see you next week with another guest. Thank you very much. See you later.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah. Bye.